All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be volume 1 in a new series that I'm going to start called Move Forward. And the reason why I wanted to start a series by that title is because so many of us are paralyzed by certain traumatic situations that occurred in our past, and it's stopping us from becoming the best version of ourselves. Many times it hampers our thought process. It might interrupt our self-image, our self-confidence, our self-esteem, because we're still stuck in that moment within our minds. It's almost like you watch a movie or you go to a movie theater, a cinema, and you're watching a film on screen and the film reel gets stuck. At least the old school film reel may have gotten stuck and the movie is on pause. That's how it is in certain people's minds whenever a traumatic situation occurs that they can't move past. They might be functional enough to continue to sustain themselves, go to work, pay their bills, etc. But within the inner recesses of their minds, they can't move past it. And it stops them from becoming the best version of themselves. It could be a relationship that failed. It could be an aspiration that they had that they now believe will no longer come to fruition because of something that happened. Maybe they wanted to be a dancer and they got into a car crash, or they wanted to be an actress and something may have happened to their face or to their vocal cords or something like that if they wanted to be a singer. In the case of Kevin Durant, we all know that back in the 2019 NBA Finals, he was given the prognosis of a damaged calf, an injury that he sustained, I believe, in the second round series against the Houston Rockets. There was always suspicion that the damage may actually have been to his Achilles, especially in the way in which he looked to the back of his leg when he first sustained the injury and where he was trying to grab. It was in the Achilles area. Of course, he was rushed back to play, especially once Golden State, I think the series was tied at 2, and they were heading back to Toronto for Game 5, something like that, and he was pressured to come back and play. In the opening quarter of the game, he was absolutely outstanding. You could see that he galvanized his teammates. Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, they all looked at him with a sense of awe. I think that he was 5 for 5 from the field or something like that in the first quarter. And of course, in the second quarter, I believe it was, he tore his Achilles tendon. And you could see that when he was down there on the ground, on the basketball floor, he was traumatized. He knew that not only was he not going to be able to help his teammates, but it was going to be a long road ahead in rehabilitation. He understood that, and you could read all of that on his face while he was laying there on the basketball hardwood. People like that, they don't like to ever have any negative stimuli enter into their conscious or subconscious mind, because if they ever allowed that, they would never have risen to the level of success that they have been able to rise to. Whether it's Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, any level of entertainment or competitive field, atmosphere, or what have you, do those participants ever allow any sense of negativity to enter into their thoughts? Because you can't win if you don't believe that you can win. You can't defeat anything if you never believe that you can. And the number one opposition that every competitor knows that they have to face and conquer is themselves. You have to conquer the self-doubt. So eventually you train yourself to remove all sources of negativity, starting from within and also without. If you happen to be in that person's retinue or in their group, entourage, whatever term you want to use, and you happen to be that source of negativity, that person is going to remove you. They have to. Because if you're not on my team, you're against me. You're the opposition. Sometimes the opposition is right there amongst those closest to you. So when Kevin Durant was given that question by Jared Greenberg of whether or not he thought that he would ever be able to come fully back, he answered in a very snippy, belligerent fashion, or at least apparently belligerent to those who may have been watching and not quite understood where his mind frame had to be in order to get back to the level of excellence that he's been displaying this entire season. But he had to do it. He has to move forward. And in the process of moving forward, it's like a snake has to shed his skin. It's like a bird has to shed its old feathers. There's always going to be a lot of collateral damage sustained whenever you decide that you have to keep going. You have to keep growing. And you have to move past these bad situations, man. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Dissected the Bucks defense last night. KD shot 12 of 18 from the floor and had 32 points in the 39-point win. And after the game, during his on-court post-game interview, he wasn't lacking any confidence. Take a listen for yourself.
Tomorrow will mark 2 years since you initially injured your calf. I know you worked your butt off to get to this point, but did you ever think you'd be this good?
Is that a real question? Of course, I mean, what you want me to say to that? Of course I did.
It's pretty impressive what you've been able to do.
Thank you, I appreciate that. But I mean, that was 2 years ago. I'm looking forward to just getting up tomorrow and going to practice, watching film, and seeing how we can get better. But I appreciate that. But that was too long ago.
Now you can see that what KD does, that's what he was born to do. Because when you're born to do something, you never consider the possibility of failure, ever. And that's why I always tell brothers, if you find yourself getting caught up in that atmosphere or in that mindset of obsessing over someone else, it's because you're not doing what you were meant to do here on this earth. Because when you're doing what you were meant to do here on this earth, you don't have the time to be focused on anyone other than yourself. You go to bed thinking about what you have to do next, and you wake up thinking about what you have to do next. When you have these people out here who spend their time or waste their energy talking about someone else, it's because they don't know why they're on the earth. So when Kevin Durant was asked that question about whether he ever believed that he would get back to the level that he was prior to the injury, and he responded how he did, it's because he never allowed himself to conceive that he would fail in his endeavor. You cannot even allow those type of thoughts to enter into your head. And that's when you ensure victory and success. That's the only way to it, man. You got to leave all that old shit behind. And a lot of times, not only do you have to cut off the person or the people who were associated with a traumatic event or negative event, you have to associate everyone who's associated with that person. Because they'll do something like what Jerry Greenberg just did, try to remind you about old shit from the past. How the hell are you going to conquer tomorrow and you're still thinking about last week?
Put some more real questions for you next time. Thanks, Kevin.
You can feel the emotion. Shannon, do you like or not like?
I wouldn't call that emotion. I just call that passion.
Love his reaction. I mean, can you say, what do you want me to say to that? Skip, every athlete believe they're going to come back from an injury. You don't think Tom Brady thought he was going to come back and be Tom Brady from that torn ACL? Skip, Alex Smith had 100 surgeries on his legs, and he still believed he was going to come back and quarterback start in the NFL. That's part of it. That's what sets them apart from everybody.
Let me say this. I have very little doubt that in the midst of his rehab, KD had his doubts. But what winners do and great competitors do is they train themselves to not allow those thoughts to maintain or gain root within the fertile soul of their mind. You have to push those seeds out of your head, man. A lot of times you have to remove people because people can be sources of negativity, endless sources of negativity, especially if they think that they're not going to have the opportunity to achieve whatever childhood dream they may have had. That's why a lot of times you have to leave your job. You have to leave your old neighborhood. You have to leave your old environment if you want to become what you see yourself as within your mind. Because a lot of times people don't want you to be anything because they don't think that they themselves are anything.
There's a lot of people that have ability in a said field, but the thing that separates the great from in their mind, the thought process that I believe I'm supremely better than the man across from me. Not that I'm a better person, but I'm better at what I do than what you do.
All great athletes are the same. Even those who did not become professional athletes. Bruce Lee was a martial artist. He's known as an actor. But if you read books about him, and you also happen to have read books about Muhammad Ali or Michael Jordan, it's almost like you're reading the same biography over and over and over again. They talk about the daily affirmations that they would repeat within themselves to make sure that they were able to reassure themselves that they're meant to become the greatest in the world at what they set out to be.
Gotta have that belief, Skip. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Everybody that makes it to the NBA, Skip, is talented. You don't get to that level without being talented. Yes, some has more talent than others, but some also have more confidence than others. And Kevin Durant, hell, I was great. So why wouldn't, if the doctors tell me, KD, you put the time in, you're going to come back, you're going to be your old self, why wouldn't I be my old self? I can Skip, because KD is not a leaper. KD doesn't rely on athleticism. Is he athletic? Sure. But athleticism is not his soul, is not how he does everything. He can still shoot the three. That didn't go. He can get mid-range and pull up. That you foul him, he make this 90% of his free throws. So he was a guy that wasn't going to be impacted. It's not like a big guy, Skip. You know, a guy like a Shaq, somebody like that, that would impact him. But KD and his skill set, that injury wasn't going to have the same impact. So for me, I love what KD said. I love the straight. He's like, is that a real question? Of course I did. I put the work in. Did you see what I was before I left?
Shannon also know he better answer this question the right way, or KD be on his ass like a damn Alabama tick. KD be on you like a damn mosquito. You answer this question wrong, Shannon Sharp. You know he stalks you on Twitter, on IG, everything. That man, that man Kevin Durant will let you know.
Right up, even though it's two, like you mentioned, 2 years, but I expected to pick right up where I left off and be historically great again. So I got no problem with what KD said, and I expect him to be what he is. I mean,
shit, Skip Baylor. When I heard him say that, I looked at LeBron. We both sit on the couch eating popcorn watching. I said, okay, nigga, you better be like that with that damn ankle. I don't want to hear about no damn high ankle sprain next year. You better go out and get us our 5th championship. We can try to kiss Jordan. I mean, shit. Look how confident KD is with his skinny ass. How about you? Got all the muscles, you still frustrated.
I don't know if we'll ever see that again. I don't know if we'll ever see a guy his size with his skill set, Skip.
Best player on the planet?
I thought Durant, Skip, when Durant came out 7 foot tall shooting the ball like that, I'm like, we ain't gonna never see that again.
So you just conceded best player on the planet, right?
I conceded.
Hey, yo, Skip and Shannon be like an old frustrated married couple.
Durant is a unique individual.
Okay.
And the likelihood of you seeing someone 7 foot tall that can handle and shoot the ball like KD is unlikely. You're probably not going to see it again.
Which is why back in my days on Cold Pizza, when Kevin was a freshman at the University of Texas, I predicted he would win multiple NBA scoring titles, and I got laughed at for a while, just for a while. Mm-hmm. Now, back to this question at hand. Did I like or not like his response? I did not like the first line that came out of his mouth. Is that a real question? No, that's not the right response to that question.
What would you have him say?
But I loved what he said thereafter, because he caught himself. He did not, so to speak, hit send after that. Because it...
thing about Kevin is that Kevin always believes that every media person is out to set him up by asking him a question to disrespect him in some way. Kevin has a huge chip on his shoulder about how he's been portrayed, at least in his mind, by the media. To a certain degree, it is understandable. He's tired of being evaluated in juxtaposition to LeBron James. I think that he does a relatively good job of maintaining, I'll say, a warm level of interaction between himself and LeBron James, even though I think that it's felt on both sides that this is my Magic Johnson to Larry Bird, type of rapport, where they both view each other as the other's biggest rival.
Greatest question in the world, but it was a very positive question, because the question was almost a softball for Kevin to knock out of the park. Did you ever think 2 years ago, he didn't go to tore your Achilles, but he tore his Achilles tendon, and you know and I know that can hamper you the rest of your career, especially if you tear it in your early 30s, when you're not the youngest of man, right? And from that point forward, that 2-year period, he not only came back full force, it feels like he took it up a level, right? Well, that's extraordinary. And it speaks well to the
Well, right now he's hit his sweet spot as a professional athlete. I always say this, a top-level athlete's sweet spot is somewhere in between the ages of 29 to 32, 33 years old. That's when the mental and the physical come together in perfect harmony, really culminating around that 32, 33-year-old range, where everything just seems to flow on automatic.
Achilles, and it speaks very well of Kevin for doing the work.
Let me ask you a question. Is Kevin Durant playing better right now than he did in his first finals, NBA Finals, when he averaged 35, 8, and 9? Is he playing better right now than when he played right then?
Well, I think that he was better physically back in their first finals. I'm talking about Golden State's first finals with him as a starting small forward against Cleveland in 2017. I think that he was better physically and more zealous in his attempt to usurp LeBron. But I think that his mastery of his craft and of his game, his self-assuredness, is better right now with the Nets. It's just that he's lacking some of the soldiers.
Even more efficient than he was then. as a shooter, he looks even more confident on an every shot basis. Every time he goes up, I think it's in. I've never seen him play with this extraordinary confidence. And I know he's got his little sidekick alongside, but he's...
And isn't it so interesting? You know, we constantly hear about how when LeBron squared off against Golden State, they had so much more talent, but he played with Kyrie. Now Kevin is playing with Kyrie, and everyone says the Brooklyn Nets are supposed to win the championship, and they're betting everybody, even without James Harden. So, you know, the media's narratives are pretty humorous.
Of this team, just as he was of the Golden State Warriors in those back-to-back finals.
Yeah.
When he went into LeBron's house, and he just shot it right in LeBron's face. Both times he made two huge shots.
Well, the second one was not on LeBron.
Well, the one that changed the first finals was right in LeBron's
Yeah,
grill.
he made a great shot.
And back-to-back finals MVPs.
Yes.
So my point is that it was a very positive question that he was asked, and to...
Once again, Golden State did not beat Cleveland in 2017 because they had more raw talent. The raw talent was relatively equal. The reason why Golden State defeated Cleveland is because they played in a real system. The Cavs did not. The Golden State Warriors were in far better overall physical condition than the Cavs were as well, because they were accustomed to constantly moving without the basketball. When the Cavs had to face that team, a team that moves as much without the ball as when each one of them has the ball, that sapped them of their energy, man. And then that team would just come at you in waves.
Questioner by saying, is that a real question? That's not the way you need to answer that.
But Skip, he was like, well, Kevin Larry, so what do you want me to say to that, Skip? Every athlete, Skip, no, even if you don't, every athlete, in order for him to remain positive, is that I'm going to be what I was pre-injury.
But yeah,
if not better.
Question that you don't know for sure. And you could say, yeah, maybe there was a moment when I had doubts right after I...
That's not for Kevin Durant to state or expound upon in the midst of an attempted title run, Skip Bayless. He has to view himself every morning like he's the fucking Terminator, like he's a cyborg, with no weaknesses, no flaws. You cannot afford to show any level of humanity or fragility in the midst of a title run. If he stands there and says, well, you know, for a moment, I never thought that I'd be back to what I was, he doesn't know if Milwaukee's watching that and the coaching staff decides to use that as a talking point. When the Bucks have their next meeting after practice the next day and say, look, we might be able to get to him mentally. One of you guys kick him in the back of the leg, see if that breaks him down a little bit. I mean, right now, these are the highest stakes of the season. So you can't afford to show any vulnerability.
But then I began to work and I began to say, I'm going to do this. There's a way to answer that question very positively, just as it was asked positively.
Skip, if Kevin Durant weighed 275, I would have had my doubts.
Okay.
If Kevin Durant was 300, but because Kevin Durant is so thin and athleticism,
Well, he could have gained weight because he couldn't do anything.
Kevin Durant ain't ever gonna gain weight.
Want a bat?
Kevin Durant, Skip, you see that frame? Kevin Durant gonna be like Kareem. Kevin Durant's gonna be like Mr. Russell, Bill Russell.
I don't know about all that. I think that KD's a person who might get a big pot belly after he retires. He looks like that type. He barely likes to work out now. I'm not saying that he's unfit. I'm just saying that he's someone who likes to maintain a very low body weight. I'm not quite sure what his conditioning program is. He's certainly very fit aerobically. But as far as his musculature, you can tell that he's not someone who has committed much in the weight room per se. So once he retires and he's no longer running 4 miles a day practicing his skills, I could definitely see him as someone who puts on a lot of weight, especially around his midsection.
Frames, Skip, some people.
I don't know. Maybe. I've seen others.
Skip, you see that, Skip? Look at them joints.
Yeah.
Okay, no way, Skip.
Well, you know and I know what happens when you stop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the point is, I thought it was a moment of growth for Kevin just to stop himself cold. He didn't jump over the cliff. He caught himself for a moment. Maybe. I've seen others.
Skip, you see that, Skip? Look at them joints.
Yeah.
Okay, no way, Skip.
Well, you know and I know what happens when you stop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the point is, I thought it was a moment of growth for Kevin just to stop himself cold. He didn't jump over the cliff. He caught himself for a moment and said, okay, don't go there.
Well, that's because he wasn't on social media. He was live with a real life person, so it was easier for him to show a certain level of restraint and inhibition. So kudos to him. But I think many times we don't give Kevin Durant the amount of credit that he deserves for his level of decorum. It's not like you hear about KD getting into bar fights or club brawls. He pretty much keeps it together, other than for idiots who try to come at him for no reason over the internet.
Remind you, remember what he did to Charles Barkley?
Right.
Not that long ago.
When he silenced him. He iced him
In fact, I
out.
think we might have that.
Yeah,
just to remind everybody how awkward this guy.
Yeah, we'll talk about his issue with Shannon Sharp and how Shannon Sharp blocked him.
Question.
You know, Kevin, there was talk about you coming back for the playoffs last year. So you really just been working on your game, trying to get back your timing and conditioning, really, to be honest, correct?
Yeah.
So, Kevin, since you want to act like a little bitch,
There was so much energy in there, wasn't it?
He was excited to come in.
That was it. And he left Charles hanging. And it wasn't the classiest way to answer the question.
Right.
And we've seen repeated misbehavior by Kevin on social media with burner accounts and the Rappaport feud that he got in.
Skip Bayless, stop acting like you don't have a burner account. Like, just knock it off. Skip kills me with all that shit. I just don't respond. I don't look at it. Get the hell out of here, Skip Bayless. You probably have 10 burner accounts on IG alone.
We've seen one thing after another where you say, "Oh, come on, you're better than that, right? You're the thinnest skinned superstar."
Well, I think sometimes, Skip, is that they feel that Charles makes it personal and doesn't be about basketball.
Okay.
And Charles,
Yeah, well, so do you. You get more personal than Charles does, Shannon Sharp.
Kyrie had been anti-media, and
Right.
the panel had been all over Kyrie.
Right.
Remember when he called the media pawns?
Right, yeah.
Okay. So there was already some bad blood operating there. But I saw Kevin finally say, "Okay, snap out of it, go forward with
Right.
this." And even in the end, Jared Greenberg says, "Next time I'll think of a better question, a more real question."
Right.
And Kevin just chuckled and said,
it's all love, bro.
love. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's growth. That's growing up right before your very eyes, because I do think he's the best player on the planet, and he.
Well, I have news for you, Skip Bayless. I guess it's cute that you think that Kevin Durant is quote-unquote growing or maturing. But it's not necessarily on the athlete to decide to just constantly take all of the media's incessant bullshit and their concerted attempts to create narratives and concoct storylines out of thin air that don't naturally exist. It's not incumbent upon them to just be the whipping boys for you so that you can have content for the next day.
Like it on and off the court, because he is highly capable. His heart, to me, has always been in the right place.
Yeah.
I agree. The end of the interview was much better than how it started.
Yeah.
I think it was really just a lot of pain. When you look at the last 2 years and when he was dealing with that injury, it obviously brings up some tough times. Like, he's past it, and he wants to be past it and just let his play speak for himself. So
Thank you, Jenny Taft. You get it. But that's basically it on that, brothers. Once again, we have to move forward with our lives. Very rarely in life is it worth going back to something that removed itself from your life. Extremely rarely. And most of the time, when you do try to rehash old things, the only thing that you're brought to remembrance of is why you got rid of it in the first place. So peace.